Probably the biggest development in the world of music during the Baroque period was the birth of opera. Opera, by definition, is a large-scale work sung to orchestral accompaniment. And the name itself, opera, is the plural of opus. The word opus means work, and so the plural work meaning that we're connecting different art forms in one big showing, one big performance, mainly combining drama and music into this overly elaborate stage show. And the idea was with the music, the music would help, the melodies especially would help amplify and put across the meaning, the emotional content of the music, of the words, the story as it goes along there. So the music amplifies the storyline. Instead of just being spoken, the singing nature of it, you can put more emotive power into it, and it's also just louder than your regular speaking voice. And this was invented in Florence, Italy, by a group called the Camerata. Most often we refer to it as the Florentine Camerata because of that. It was a group of musicians, artists, and other philosophers, etc., that got together in Florence there and decided, hey, let's make a new musical, dramatic idea in music, new style, based around the stories of ancient Greek and Roman tragedies, and use the music, like I was saying, to amplify and really put across that emotional character in the works. So the main ideals that the Camerata started out with, first off, with the use of polyphony, they felt that the words were merely a pretext to the music. They weren't as important as the melodies that were being heard, because you have so many melodies crossing over each other, you really can't understand the text. They felt, and this is a quote, that counterpoint was a mangler of the poetry. And so they created the opera more so in the style of Greek tragedy, where there was always one voice happening and then anything else was accompaniment to that, which gave birth to homophony. So you can kind of think of homophony, where we have a single melody with accompaniment, like our standard song form nowadays, is it's kind of the child, the offspring of polyphony. And they believe that it was more useful in presenting the harmonic motion of the music as well. And the biggest influence that this had is that it was more succinct, it was more direct in the expressive nature, so you could hear exactly what was being presented in the text very clearly right up front, without having to decipher it in kind of the code of imitation. And part of it, again, is a reaction to the overly used polyphony in madrigals in the late Renaissance period. So they still used, and they took the word painting idea from madrigals to help express the text, but they realized and decided that one melody at a time, much easier to hear, understand, and present in this word painting idea than having four melodies happen at the same time. In discussing opera, there's a couple main elements that we always want to know about and be aware of while we're listening to watching an opera. First off, you have the libretto, the text, the storyline, the songs that you're going to hear. Then you have the overture, which is kind of the prelude music. It is the music you hear when you're getting seated at the very beginning of an opera or musical of any sort. Nowadays, even ballet, Broadway shows, etc., they still have overtures in some sense. They introduce you to some of the main musical themes and ideas that you'll hear throughout the rest of the show in more detail, and kind of present the setting and the mood to get the show started. In specific songs, we have three types of songs that we want to listen for and get to know. We have the recitative, say that 5 times fast, the aria, and then our choruses. So a recitative, you can translate that to recited, is a style which is halfway between full-on singing and just a spoken voice. And the main idea behind recitatives is to push the plot line, the story forward. So this is where you get the introduction to characters and what they're there for and stuff of that nature. As we move on to the arias, these are where the show kind of stops for a moment in time, and the character present that's singing, often a tenor or soprano, is singing their heart out and expressing their inner emotions about what's going on at that point in time, like a broken-hearted love or some kind of tragedy and death, etc. They're really pronouncing and expressing their emotions. And then you have the ensembles and or slash the chorus elements where all the background characters and everybody involved is kind of commenting on the action, the events that are occurring at that time period. So again, we have our prelude, which is our overture, the beginning music. You have your recitatives that are the plotline storytelling parts, songs within the opera. You have your arias, which are the big expressive emotional content, the big showstoppers, and your chorus moments. And we'll get to know some specific ones as we go along here. You also have the development of opera. You have what we call intermezzi, or interludes, basically, between big dramatic scenes. And these were little comic pieces that were just a little lighthearted kind of break from the overly dramatic sense of the main scenes there. And eventually this turned into what we call opera buffa, or comic opera. So versus the very serious nature of your standard opera, which we call opera seria. So you have serious opera, and then eventually we get comic opera, which we'll see and we'll talk about most particularly with Mozart as we get there.